Welcome into another episode of the PFF College Football Show. Max Chadwick alongside Dalton Wasserman here to break down my top 10 offensive lines in college football entering the 2025 season. Dalton, offensive line is always an interesting one to rank because, there's some positions like quarterback room and running back unit and receiving core where you can have one superstar kind of carry the room. Offensive line, you really need all five guys to at least be at an average level because if you have a weak link on the offensive line, the whole thing could fall apart, honestly. So I'm excited to kind of break down what I think right now are the 10 best offensive line units in college football entering next year.
You mentioned it in so many team success. We talk about this in the NFL and in college football where if you don't have a good offensive line, it's going to be really, really hard to win a championship. Even last year's national champion, Ohio State, there was a time when we really questioned after Josh Simmons got hurt if they could win a title with that offensive line. They got it fixed up just in time for the playoff run, and that was really a big catalyst to their success. But there are teams at times during the season where we can almost eliminate them from playoff contention and national championship contention based on a lack of good offensive line play. So if you have that going into the season, both experience and talent up front, you're at a huge advantage.
You actually put out a tweet recently, right, breaking down the offensive line grades for the last 9 Super Bowl champions. What was it that you found there?
It was, I believe, most of them, pretty much all. It was 7 of the 9 had a top 10 offensive line in the NFL, and the only 2 that didn't were 2 of the Chiefs teams that had Patrick Mahomes, and they were still in the top 15. So when you look at what you need, especially to protect your quarterback and how important that is, and then obviously get things going in the run game too, we're hitting an era of football where you cannot win a championship with a bad offensive line. You just can't do it, especially in the NFL. Obviously, we'll get more into that during the season, but I think the same applies in college football. When you look at most of the teams that were in the playoff last year, right? Ohio State figured it out at the right time. Notre Dame's offensive line got better as the year went on. Texas had arguably the best offensive line in college football. So many of those teams, Penn State's offensive line got a lot better. And then you saw the teams in the playoff that had suspect offensive lines, like Indiana unable to pick up blitzes, and what was the other one I was just thinking? Arizona State's offensive line wasn't great.
Tennessee had some issues.
Tennessee had issues up front. Those are the teams that got knocked out even early in the playoffs. So I think when you look at this, especially a list with a top 10 like this, you really start to narrow in on, okay, some of these national title contenders have a big advantage up front if you have an offensive line and one that stays healthy throughout the season.
And honestly, having a great quarterback is the most critical part of having a great offense in today's day and age of football, but having a great offensive line is probably second, honestly, because if you don't have good protection for your quarterback, you can't open up holes in the run game. It's hard to put up points on the board no matter how good your receiving core or running backs are, honestly. So offensive line, yes, it's the least glamorous part of an offense, but it is one of the most important parts of an offense. So let's hop into my top 10 offensive lines in just a second, but I want to remind you guys that a lot of these metrics that we're going to be talking about are only available with a PFF Plus subscription, considering we're one of the only outlets out there that have stats for offensive linemen, right? So if you want to get all the stats on all the offensive linemen in college football and in the NFL, get a PFF Plus subscription at subscribe.pff.com today. And also you get access to our 2026 NFL Mock Draft Simulator where you can draft a full 5 rounds and some of these offensive linemen for your favorite NFL team as well. But my honorable mention, I should say, offensive line is the school we just talked about, the Penn State Nittany Lions. Now, there are a lot of people out there who, when this list came out initially, were upset that Penn State was not in the top 10 or even top 5 of this list, and ironically, they're calling me a Penn State hater when I've grown up a Penn State fan my entire life, so I always love when that happens. But Penn State does have a lot of experience, I will say, on their offensive line right now. 5 players returning to the Nittany Lions who played at least 400 snaps last year on the offensive line. Vega Ione, the guard, is a number 8 interior offensive lineman in the country for me. He was the 4th most valuable Power 4 guard in the country, in Power 4, according to our wins above average metric. Nolan Rucci, right tackle, also back for another year. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school, never really played that much at Wisconsin, transferred over to Penn State, and had a pretty good year in his first year really as a starter with a 73.2 PFF grade. Nick Dawkins is back at center. He was 10th in the Big Ten last year with a 65.4 run blocking grade. Drew Shelton is back at left tackle. He had a 65.7 pass blocking grade last year. The only new starter really will be at right guard in Cooper Cousins, who's a true sophomore, but he was the number 1 interior offensive line recruit coming out of high school in the 2024 class, and he played 172 snaps as a true freshman. So a lot of experience on Penn State's offensive line, but outside of Vega Yoni, Dalton, I just don't think there's a lot of star power right now, which is why they came in as an honorable mention.
There isn't, and I really like the tackle duo of Rucci and Shelton, and I think what you might see this year is a big jump in the run game. Andy Kotelnicki, obviously, with a lot of different run schemes, and it's a complex running game with a lot of different concepts, but we saw what he built at Kansas and what they continue to do at Kansas with the run blocking. I believe Kansas led the nation in run blocking grade, or led the Power 4 in run blocking grade last year. That's even after Kotelnicki has left. So I think you're going to get another big jump. Penn State's offensive line was 37th in run blocking grade this past year. I think you could get a jump into the top 20 with this group. Another year of cohesion, a second year in the system. Obviously, Drew Aller back at quarterback running the show. I think this offensive line, you mentioned it, maybe not yet at least a first-round type of prospect, but aligned with what should be 5 solid starters in the second year of an excellent system under Kotelnicki.
Absolutely. So Penn State, my honorable mention offensive line. At number 10 is the Clemson Tigers, who brought back 5 of their 6 offensive linemen who played at least 500 snaps for them last year. So again, a very experienced offensive line there in Clemson. Blake Miller is once again the right tackle for them. He's my number 7 returning offensive tackle in college football. He's entering his 4th season as the starting right tackle for the Clemson Tigers. 77.3 career run blocking grade, top 30 mark among all tackles in America over the last 3 years, and he's coming off a career high 76.4 pass blocking grade too. Tristan Lee is the left tackle. He's entering his 3rd year as the starting left tackle for the Clemson Tigers. So you got a left tackle start for 3 years at left tackle, a right tackle start for 4 years at right tackle, and then on the interior, you got Ryan Linthicum and Walker Parks, both of them returning starters at center and guard. Harris Sewell will take over at left guard, but he's played 982 snaps across his first 2 seasons of college football. So just the entire starting 5 for Clemson, Dalton, is extremely experienced, and Blake Miller especially is a really, really good tackle we have in college football.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the big thing here is experience, right? Because Clemson, especially down the stretch, they were struggling to run block, and they ended the year just 75th in the country in overall grade from their offensive line. I think just as the year went on, they were really struggling to run the football and relying on Cade Klubnik to win and get outside the pocket and make throws outside the pocket. But certainly experience still matters, right? When you're talking about Clemson having a veteran group and a group that's not built on transfers coming in or not having a whole lot of guys going out, right? It's what makes Clemson now in the era of the transfer portal so unique, is that they get these units that stick together for a long time. So do I have a little bit of a question as far as if we're going to pick Clemson to win a national championship? Their offensive line and their run game, I think, would be the biggest question for me, but no doubt they have enough experience. They have a habit of rotating guards. They usually rotate 3 guards between two spots within games. So plenty of guys with experience, plenty of guys with big game experience, especially when you look at the ACC title game last year and the playoff. Just got to execute, to me, a little bit better in the run game to move up further up this list and really solidify Clemson as an inner circle national title contender.
Yeah, the running game for Clemson is going to be the biggest question mark for them next year, considering they're probably going to start a true freshman at running back in Gideon Davison, who was, of course, a top 5 running back coming out of high school, but still he's only a true freshman. Then, yeah, the offensive line struggled a little bit in run blocking last year, but still it brought back a lot of experience. And like I said before, experience is important on offensive lines, and you have 5 guys with extensive experience. You're probably going to be somewhere near the top 10 of this list, and why Clemson comes in at number 10 here. Number 9 for me is the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, who have a really exciting young tackle duo in Emil Wagner at right tackle and Anthony Knapp at left tackle. Emil Wagner, my number 5 tackle in college football. He finished his junior year as the 3rd most valuable Power 4 tackle, according to our wins above average metric. Anthony Knapp started 15 games at left tackle as a true freshman and had a really solid 69.2 run blocking grade. Billy Schrouth is back at left guard. He only allowed 1 combined sack or hit across 363 pass blocking snaps in 2024. Charles Jagusa, a guy a lot of people are excited about, is going to start at right guard. He has many fans in the NFL draft circles right now. Only played in 2 games last year due to a torn pectoral muscle, but had a really strong 77.1 pass blocking grade against 2 elite defensive lines in Penn State and Ohio State in the college football playoff semifinal and the national title game. And then Ashton Craig will likely start at center for Notre Dame, but he did start in the first 3 games last year before tearing his ACL. So still a lot of experience from Notre Dame on that offensive line. I really like the tackle duo they have with Emil Wagner and Anthony Knapp. And then on the interior, there's some exciting talent too, like Charles Jagusah.
Agreed. It feels like Notre Dame just keeps churning out good offensive tackles. Happens all the time, and Wagner and Knapp are another good pair. And it's funny because Knapp was so young; he wasn't even supposed to start last year before Jagusah got hurt at left tackle, and he had to go in there, and he did a really nice job, all things considered. He was a true freshman, and Wagner, I'm with you, he's one of the most consistent, one of the best tackles in the country. It's that interior where they lost a couple of transfers that I would worry about a little bit in pass protection more than anything, especially with whatever their quarterback situation is going to look like. And I think it was Marcus Freeman even said recently, might be a 2-quarterback system down there at Notre Dame. So it's really going to be interesting to see how this backfield shakes out at quarterback and the interior offensive line, how they can make an adjustment to losing some of those veterans. But this tackle duo gives you a really high floor, and you know they're going to be able to block the run game well.
Absolutely. They also brought in a 5-star true freshman at offensive tackle too, and Will Black too. I don't think he'll play too much in his freshman year, but very exciting young offensive tackle they have there, and Will Black too. All right, my number 8 offensive line in college football is the Miami Hurricanes, who have Francis Mauigoa, who could be a top 10 pick in the 2026 NFL Draft. My number 2 offensive tackle in college football entering next year. The only tackle in the country last year with 2 or fewer sacks plus hits allowed on over 500 pass blocking snaps. So he never really allowed Cam Ward to get hit at all last year at Miami. James Brockermeyer transferred in from TCU, and he was 3rd among Big 12 centers last year with a 71.5 PFF grade. Inez Cooper is starting at right guard for the Hurricanes for the 3rd straight season, and he has a 70.8 pass blocking grade over the last 2 years. The left side of Miami's offensive line is a little more uncertain than the right side of it right now, but Markel Bell is probably going to be the left tackle and be the blindside protector for Carson Beck next year. He's a massive player. He's 6'9", 340 pounds, and he started 5 games for the Hurricanes at left tackle last year, too. So he does have experience starting at left tackle for Miami. He will probably be the full-time starter at left tackle next year. But if he's not up to the task, they do have a former 5-star recruit in Samson Akunlala, who's a redshirt sophomore now as well. Left guard will likely be a redshirt senior in Ryan Rodriguez. He started the opening game for Miami last year, but he had a season-ending ankle injury after 38 snaps. But the fact that he did enter the year as a starting left guard shows that he is probably a solid player for the Miami Hurricanes. So with a lot of stars like Francis Mauigoa, I like James Brockermeyer a lot too. And then I think there's some talent there on the left side of the offensive line too.
I'm with you. Mauigoa is the headliner. And then you talk about, I really like the addition of Brockermeyer, right? He was at Alabama before TCU. Yeah. Is that correct? He's a veteran guy who's been around college football, had a really good season at TCU last year. And that left side is interesting because what you're trying to replace is a guy in Jalen Rivers who even within games would switch between left tackle and left guard, and they asked him to do so much last year, and now he's off to the NFL. So they really need to find 2 solidified starters on the left side of this offensive line, especially with Carson Beck coming in there, and he doesn't improvise anywhere near the level or at all really at the level that Cam Ward did. So I think when you talk about having pass protection on that left side, that blind side especially, was something that hurt Georgia and Carson Beck last year at offensive tackle. I think the right side will be fine. I think they'll be fine at center, but finding solidified starters on that left side is going to be a really big key to the success of Miami's offense.
Carson Beck is really like the Jared Goff of college football, and what I'm saying by that is he needs a good supporting cast to succeed, right? So Miami having a good offensive line is paramount for Carson Beck bouncing back next year and also having a great receiving core. Because we saw last year, Georgia had a great offensive line, but the receiving core was lacking a lot, and that's why Carson Beck kind of his play dipped last year. If Miami's offensive line could be really good, like I think it will be, and then also have an improved receiving core, I think Carson Beck can remind a lot of people why he was seen as one of the best quarterbacks in the country in college football. At number 7 is the Auburn Tigers, and all 5 starters on Auburn's offensive line were also starters last year too. Connor Lew, my number 5 interior offensive lineman in college football, he had a 76.4 PFF grade that was 5th among Power 4 centers last year. They also brought back a couple of starters at guard in Dylan Wade and Jeremiah White. Both of them earned 70-plus run blocking grades a season ago. So they brought back their entire starting interior offensive line from last year. But their 2 tackles will be transfers in Virginia Tech's Xavier Chaplin and USC's Mason Murphy. Chaplin is seen as one of the top offensive linemen in the transfer portal. He was one of 6 ACC tackles last year who posted 70-plus PFF grades, both as a pass blocker and as a run blocker. Mason Murphy has started 22 games in his career at USC. So you have maybe the second best receiving core in the country, in my opinion. Auburn does, only behind Ohio State. And now a top 10 offensive line, too. Dalton, this supporting cast for Jackson Arnold from what he had at Oklahoma is night and day. Considering Oklahoma's offensive line and receiving core were among the worst in the country, I think Auburn has a top 10 offensive line and a top 3 receiving core in the country, too.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking that if Jackson Arnold's been watching our show at all, he should be really happy with what he's got coming to him at Auburn. When you look at this crew up front, on top of the fact, Hugh Freeze calling plays and knowing he wants to run the football and having athletes like this up front, especially Connor Lewitt center is really the glue that holds it all together. There's a boatload of potential. I mean, I think that's really where we're at with Auburn is we just need to see them play games now, and we need to see Jackson Arnold look better with a better supporting cast, but he certainly has it. You mentioned the receiving core. We've talked about that already, but this offensive line 1 through 5, this could be a really darn good unit, and those 2 transfers at tackle are going to be the key to it, but we've seen good play from them both before, and we should have at least some good faith that they can execute. It's just going to be a matter of Arnold executing behind him. He must feel like when he gets back there, he's going to be like, wow, this is what football is supposed to be like in college, because last year at Oklahoma, it was just a mess.
Disaster.
I mean, it was just an absolute mess. He was one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the country. You get these 5 guys playing the way that up to their potential like they should. Boy, Auburn, they're in a good position. I know there's always off-season champions and preseason hype and all of that, but they have a boatload of talent, and it starts up front as well.
Yeah, you just look at what Oklahoma had last year. I believe the second worst receiving grade in the country last year. Yeah, second worst in the country. Only New Mexico State had a worse receiving grade than Oklahoma last year. And then also Oklahoma, in terms of pass blocking grade, I'm pulling it up right now, they were outside, I believe, the top 100 as well in pass blocking grade.
So that sounds right.
92nd pass blocker. But I believe the entire offensive line grade was outside the top 100.
Yeah, if I remember right, I think Arnold, when I was looking over some stuff for him, looking at our SEC previews, and I think he was either like the 6th most sacked quarterback in the country.
Yeah.
Something, and that was with missing a few games and Michael Hawkins playing and all that too. I mean, it was just a disaster, and you go from that now to what Auburn has on this offensive line, and then we've mentioned the weapons already. It could be some fun times down there for the Tigers. They might be the SEC breakout team this year.
Absolutely. Yeah, Oklahoma's offense was really a disaster last year and had one of the worst supporting casts in the country. They had the 5th worst offensive grade in college football last year, actually the worst in the Power 4 too. So, yeah, I think Jackson Arnold definitely walking into a better situation than what he had at Oklahoma. At number 6, a school that is no stranger to producing elite offensive linemen, that is the Iowa Hawkeyes, who is one of 2 schools that has multiple offensive linemen that made the top 10 of my rankings, whether it be the top 10 tackles or top 10 interior offensive linemen. Both those videos are already out for you guys right now if you want to go see who the best individual offensive linemen are. But Iowa has 2 of those players, and they have easily the highest graded offensive line in the Power 4 last year with a 93.1 offensive line grade from last year. And 2 of those players I mentioned before, right tackle Jennings Dunker, center Logan Jones, they were in my top 10 for their positions. Dunker, my number 6 tackle in the country. He was 2nd among all tackles in college football last year with a 90.2 run blocking grade. And then Logan Jones, the center, is my number 4 interior offensive lineman in college football. He led all Power 4 centers with an 83.6 PFF grade last year. Their only other returning starter, and why Iowa's a little bit lower on this list, Bo Stevens. He had a 71.1 PFF grade at left guard, tied for 7th in the Big Ten. Cade Pieper is a new starter at right guard, but Dalton, he really flashed on limited snaps last year. Get this, 97.6 PFF grade, was the best of any guard in the country that played at least 100 snaps. It was around only 100 snaps for Cade Pieper at guard, but man, 97.6 grade on those limited snaps shows kind of the potential that he might have there at guard. And the starting left tackle will likely be either redshirt junior Jack Dotzler or redshirt sophomore Trevor Lauk. each of whom only played fewer than 25 snaps last year. So, yes, Iowa's only one of 2 schools in America with multiple offensive linemen in my top 10 rankings, but the reason why they're here at number 6 and not in the top 5 is because the other 3 spots are a little more uncertain right now.
And the guy I need to give credit for with this and them having the best run blocking grade in the Power 4 as well, that really supports that highest overall grade in the Power 4, is Tim Lester, their offensive coordinator. He comes in last year and he implements this outside zone scheme that's a little more familiar with guys in the Shanahan tree, right? Think about Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and those guys running all that outside zone. They moved to that this past year under Tim Lester after, for years and years running more of a gap scheme, power scheme, a lot of ISO and fullbacks on the field. They were still heavy. They still use 2 tight ends and get under center a lot, but putting in this outside zone scheme, it's a little more modern, a little more movement-based. Dunker's fantastic in it. You mentioned Pieper. He had a 95 run blocking grade last year, in part because that scheme is it's so fundamentally, I don't want to say easy, but kind of easier for guys to learn because the principles are the same every single play, and you're just reading the front side and then moving back into the second level. So I think Tim Lester is a guy who really deserves a lot of credit for the development of this offensive line. And really, there was a couple of years there where Iowa was struggling up front. It wasn't what we were used to seeing. Now they're back to being an elite physical offensive line who mauls you in the run game. Also very good and sound in pass protection. Maybe Mark Gronowski can get the passing game going a little bit, but this line is the foundation of this offense for sure.
It has always been for Iowa, and it's a big reason why Caleb Johnson had such a great year last year. And, of course, he's a great running back in his own right, but whoever the next running back is for Iowa next year should still have a great offensive line in front of them with 2 proven stars in Jennings Dunker and Logan Jones, and then maybe a potential star in Cade Pieper, the way he looked on his limited snaps last year. To kind of recap, 10 through 6 for me, honorable mention was Penn State, Clemson number 10, Notre Dame number 9, Miami number 8, Auburn number 7, Iowa number 6. Now in the top 5 of my list, and at number 5 is the Oregon Ducks, who brought in 3 starters along the offensive line from the transfer portal in Nevada tackle Isaiah World, Texas State tackle Alex Harkey, and USC interior offensive lineman Emmanuel Pregnon. World is really a hot name right now in 2026 NFL draft. He had an 82.4 pass blocking grade at left tackle last year for the Wolfpack. A lot of people think he could be a first-round pick in the 2026 NFL draft. Alex Harkey will start at right tackle for Oregon. He was 9th in the nation with an 85.8 PFF grade in 2024 while at Texas State. Emmanuel Pregnon will be the starter at left guard. He did not allow a single sack on 532 pass blocking snaps last year while at USC. As good as those 3 are, and they're very impressive, the star of Oregon's offensive line is still their center, Yupani Lalulu, my number 2 center in college football, and he was one of only 6 centers in the Power 4 last year who had a top 20 grade as a pass blocker and as a run blocker, and he still has not allowed a sack on 720 career pass blocking snaps so far at Oregon. The only real unknown on the offensive line really for me is their right guard in Dave Yulee, but he did start 4 games for the Ducks last year. So he does have some experience for Oregon, but Dalton, a lot of guys coming in from the portal on Oregon's offensive line, and then, of course, one of the best centers in the country, Yupani Lalulu.
Yeah, Oregon does a really nice job of developing interior offensive linemen, especially kind of like Clemson, where sometimes they'll rotate him in and get him in some part-time work. So Yulee's not completely inexperienced back there, which is good. You mentioned Lalulu is the star of the show, and I think the biggest, I don't want to say question, but the biggest thing they need to develop is World and Harkey replacing Josh Connerly and Johnny Cornelius, 2 NFL tackles out there, and you're talking about protecting an inexperienced quarterback in Dante Moore, but you have to love the way that Dan Lanning and Will Stein have prioritized this offensive line, even though they've lost several veterans and primetime guys, NFL-level guys over the last couple years. They just keep finding NFL-caliber talent. If World is that guy, maybe a first-round type of guy that some people think he can be, Dante Moore is going to feel really good in the pocket, and that's going to be the biggest thing. It's just him not being flustered under pressure, but you don't have to worry about that if you're not under pressure very often, and we've seen that the last couple of years. Bo Nix was hardly touched 2 years ago. They were still really good in pass protection with Dylan Gabriel last year. If they can keep that going with Dante Moore, got a really, really good shot to win the Big Ten again, I should say.
Absolutely, yeah. Dante Moore, I'm really excited to see what he could do for Oregon next year, and I think he has one of the top 5 offensive lines in the country protecting him up front. So at number 5 is Oregon. At number 4 is Florida, who actually had the 3rd highest graded offensive line in the Power 4 last year with an 85.9 PFF grade, and they brought back 5 of the 6 players who played at least 300 snaps on that offensive line last year. Jake Slaughter is the best of the bunch on that list right there. My number one interior offensive lineman in college football. He was the only Power 4 center who had an 80-plus grade as both a pass blocker and as a run blocker last year. We mentioned it time and time again. He played a murderer's row of defensive tackles on that schedule for Florida. So the fact he went up against elite competition and still dominated out there, I thought Jake Slaughter should have won the Remington Award last year as the best center in college football. He's pretty easily the best center in college football entering next year, in my opinion. Then you also have left tackle Austin Barber, who's actually been mocked a lot in a lot of way too early 2026 NFL mock drafts as well in the first round there. He only had 5 pressures allowed on 107 true pass sets last year. At guard will once again be Najee Harris and Damian George Jr., who each tied for 6th in the SEC with an identical 72.4 run blocking grade. And then redshirt sophomore Bryce Lovett will be the new starting right tackle, but he did tie for 7th among SEC guards last year with a 73.3 PFF grade on 362 snaps. So one of the best offensive lines in the country last year, Dalton, and they brought back pretty much everyone from that offensive line.
I think there's some who would argue that the Gators even higher on this list, considering the experience and the talent that they're bringing back. You mentioned it with Jake Slaughter as the glue of it all. I knew we weren't getting through this episode without some rant about Jake Slaughter. I already knew that's going to be a weekly thing from you for the rest of the season. But no, this is a fantastic group. And you talk about another one, a young quarterback trying to make him comfortable in DJ Lagway, trying to make Jaden Baugh, a young running back, comfortable in the backfield. I think when you have an offensive line like this, it makes your life so much easier to call plays with a young quarterback and just allow him to just make the throws because you're going to be protected. And Slaughter especially, it just feels like when I was watching his tape, just doesn't make any mistakes. You don't see any mental mistakes. If he gets beat, which isn't very often, but he doesn't make any mental mistakes. And when you have a center like that leading the rest of this group, you're in a really good spot up front.
Yeah, especially for a quarterback, a young quarterback, DJ Lagway, having a great center like Jake Slaughter to call protections for you just takes a lot off your plate as a young quarterback, honestly. So, yeah, you got Jake Slaughter, who I think could be a first-round pick at center, which is saying a lot considering centers don't really go in the first round. And then also Austin Barber at left tackle. A lot of people think could be a first-round pick at left tackle. Plus, both your guards are coming back for another year. And then plus, your right tackle, Bryce Lovett, did play over 300 snaps last year for you at guard. So one of the best offensive lines last year should be, again, one of the best offensive lines in 2025. At number 3 is the Texas A&M Aggies, who also have one of the most experienced offensive lines in college football. All 6 players who played at least 300 snaps for the Aggies last year in the offensive line are back for another year. And the star of that unit is their guard, Armaj Reed-Adams, who's my number 2 interior offensive lineman in the country and the best guard in America. He was 2nd among Power 4 guards last year in PFF grade, run blocking grade, and wins above average. And the only one who was above him in all 3 of those stats was Willie Lampkin, who's now in the NFL with the Los Angeles Rams. Trey Zoom III and Demetrius Crownover are both back at tackle. They each earned 75-plus PFF grades last year at tackle. Chase Basantis is the starting left guard once again. He tied for 8th in the SEC with a 71.8 run blocking grade in 2024. And then Kalinu Fayu is the starter at center. He only allowed 1 sack on 381 pass blocking snaps last year. So Texas A&M had a really good O-line last year, and they brought back quite literally everybody from that offensive line and should have, again, one of the best offensive lines in the country.
This is something to be excited about for Texas A&M. We've talked about just the absolute slew of ball carriers that they have who are going to be flying all over the field, but it starts with this front 5. And if in their first year under Colin Klein, 27th in the nation in overall grade, 25th in run blocking grade, and it should be even better than that this year, especially with the diverse schemes. And you got to remember, the first half of last year, they didn't really know what they wanted their offense to be. Connor Wigman was struggling. Marcel Reed was getting broken in. Now with the dual threat Reed as the quarterback heading into the season with a full offseason as the starter, I think the diversity you can get into with these run schemes, with the way Colin Klein calls his offense, we saw it for years at Kansas State, then we saw it last year a little bit when Reed was playing quarterback for A&M. This offensive line and the experience and talent they have and the physicality they have up front, they want to get downhill, they want to run power, they want to be pulling Reed-Adams around the corner. They're going to do a lot of different things up front, but they're physical, they're talented, they're consistent. I think Klein's going to have them playing even better this year.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch this run game for A&M next year with one of the best running back units in the country. Go check out that video if you haven't watched it already. They have a great quarterback in Marcel Reed, who's really good at running the football, and then also a receiving core that can also run the football a lot with Terry Bussey and Kevin Concepcion back there. And again, one of the best offensive lines in the country too, blocking for them. So Texas A&M checks in at number 3 on my list. At number 2 is Utah, who brings back, in my opinion, the best offensive tackle in college football in Spencer Fano. He was stellar as a true sophomore at right tackle for the Utes, leading all tackles in America with a 92.7 PFF grade and a 93.6 run blocking grade last year. On the opposite side is another player who a lot of people think could be a first-round pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, in Caleb Lumu, 75.8 pass blocking grade on true pass sets last year. That was 8th among all Big 12 tackles. So, Dalton, they might have 2 tackles who go in the first round of next year's draft, Spencer Fano and Caleb Lumu. And then on the interior, you have a left guard in Tanoa Togiai, who was 3rd among Power 4 guards last year in overall grade and run blocking grade. Jaron Kump is back at center. He had a solid 71.1 pass blocking grade in 2024. And then Michael Mokafisi only played in 7 games last year before suffering a season-ending injury, but he's entering his 4th year as Utah's starting right guard. So Utah, honestly, Dalton, was very close to being number 1 on this list for me because they have 2 guys who could be first-round picks at tackle, and they have a really, really good interior like a Tanoa Togiai, who in my opinion is one of the best guards in the country.
Based on the grading and the run blocking, you certainly could have made him number 1. I think he had every opportunity to do so. And I think for me, similar to what I mentioned earlier with Iowa, you want a zone blocking clinic, that's Utah, especially with Fano and Lomu at tackle. Just unbelievable athletes who get on the second level with ease. They move their feet with ease. This team, they need some work in pass protection, but I'll tell you what, I'm excited to watch their run game between the zone blocking and then Devin Dampier now in there as the quarterback as well, and all the different option looks you can give with him that they didn't have from any of their quarterbacks last year. I think this Utah run game is going to be really exciting and a serious problem for a lot of teams in the Big 12.
Absolutely. I cannot wait to watch that Utah offensive line next year. They might have the best tackle duo in the country, one of the best guards in the country, a returning center, and a returning right guard. They literally, I think all 5 starters are back for another year, and 3 of them are superstars on that offensive line, really. So Utah, number 2, very close to being number 1. But Dalton, for the 2nd straight year, my number 1 offensive line in America is the Alabama Crimson Tide. And because Alabama, the only school in America with 3 offensive linemen that were in my top 10 rankings, whether it be at tackle or on the interior offensive line. Caden Proctor, my number 3 tackle in college football in our way too early 2026 NFL mock draft. He was our number 1 overall pick in that mock draft because against some elite competition, he has elite tape. He has 3 games against Georgia and South Carolina in his career. In those 3 games, 90.4 pass blocking grade, only 1 pressure allowed on 96 pass blocking snaps. And we're talking about going up against Dylan Stewart, Kyle Kennard, Mykel Williams, Jalen Walker. All those guys are NFL players, and 3 of them probably going to be first-round picks in the draft, and he still was an elite player against those guys. So I think Caden Proctor could be a top 10 pick at least at tackle next year. His movement ability at his size, around 6'7", 360, is preposterous. So Caden Proctor, my number 3 tackle in the country. Parker Brailsford is my number 7 interior offensive lineman in the country. 2nd most valuable returning Power 4 center over the last 2 years, according to our wins above average metric. And then you also have Jaden Roberts coming back at right guard. He was 10th on my interior offensive lineman list. 77.8 run blocking grade over the last 2 years, which is 10th among Power 4 guards. So you have those 3 coming back, who all of them are among the best in the country at their positions. Yes, we do have some questions on the other 2 spots in the offensive line in right tackle, Wilkin Formby, and left guard and Cam Dewberry, who's transferring in, ironically, from Texas A&M. But I think the trio of Proctor, Brailsford, and Roberts was enough for them to be number 1 on this list.
Certainly as talented as any offensive line in college football. You look at the work that Brailsford has done at center during his time with Kalen DeBoer, both at Washington and at Alabama. Caden Proctor, we're waiting on the breakout for a full season of the grades, but you can see the talent. I mean, you just had, 6'7", and 350. He doesn't move like a guy that size for sure. Jaden Roberts, considered the strongest player on Alabama's entire team, a powerful run blocker. And I'm curious to see how Ryan Grubb puts it all together now, reuniting as the offensive coordinator with Kalen DeBoer after a year with the Seattle Seahawks. And with Washington, they got into a little more of that zone run game. Maybe with Roberts and Proctor, bigger guys, maybe they'll get a little bit more downhill. But that offense with Michael Penix at Washington worked better when they had a little bit of balance. The weeks they had some balance, and Penix was actually the best play-action passer in the country that year. Maybe if they can repeat the same, get the run game going, get the play-action game going for Ty Simpson, but this offensive line should make that job a lot easier. They're huge, except for Brailsford. They're all really talented. They got to fill in those other two spots, but I think they should feel certainly very good about the foundation they have here at Alabama.
Absolutely, yeah. And they also brought in a 5-star recruit on the interior offensive line in Michael Carroll, who's a number 14 player in the country coming out of high school too. So they also have a 5-star true freshman coming in there too. And I should have mentioned this earlier too, but Texas A&M has a 5-star tackle coming in and Lamont Rogers coming in. So yeah, a lot of really talented players in the SEC right now on the offensive line. But Alabama checks in for the second straight year as my number 1 offensive line in college football. To kind of recap the top 10, honorable mention, Penn State, number 10, Clemson, number 9, Notre Dame, number 8, Miami, number 7, Auburn, number 6, Iowa, number 5, Oregon, number 4, Florida, number 3, Texas A&M, number 2, Utah, and number 1, Alabama. Dalton, anything you would change in this top 10? Anyone should be higher or lower, or anyone that missed the list that should have been on it?
No, I don't think I would change anything necessarily. I think any of the top 4 probably have at least some sort of argument for the number 1 spot. I think those top 4 could be in any order. No, but I think the rest of the top 10 is pretty solid. Clemson's the only one at 10. Maybe I'm a little more unsure about, because yes, they have experience, but the grades are a little bit lower, and I'm worried about the run game. But just thinking about some teams that maybe could fit in there. And I know you weren't really doing a whole lot of really much group of 5, but team that won the Joe Moore Award last year, and Army's got some pieces coming back. I wasn't sure if maybe they'd be an honorable mention. Missouri's got their interior coming back with Connor Tollison and Caden Green. I think that's going to be another really good unit this year, and they were the 4th highest graded unit in the country last year, but they lose both their offensive tackles. Missouri, I think, is going to have another good one, and I'm trying to see if there's any others that fit in here. Kansas is a really good run blocking unit. We'll see what Texas can do to recover from some of the losses they had. Indiana has a pretty good unit when they got Pat Coogan from Notre Dame now, I believe, is their new center. So I think you got some other teams on the fringe, but Missouri and Army are probably two that stick out to me that weren't on this list.
Yeah, Army was definitely one I considered. They do bring back some guys like Brady Small at center, come back for another year. So, yeah, they do have some guys that I like. I think they do lose a couple pieces on the offensive line, so that's why I just couldn't have them in my top 10. But I definitely consider them. Who else I consider? I considered Indiana was very close to being on it. In fact, I almost bumped off Penn State from the honorable mention, put it in Indiana. I do like what they bring back on that offensive line, bringing in Pat Coogan at center from Notre Dame, Carter Smith at left tackles, one of the best tackles in the country, in my opinion, too. I did consider Texas, but just a lot of unknowns on that offensive line now after losing so many guys from last year, including your 2 tackles and one of your guards, too. Illinois brought back a lot of that offensive line too, with J.C. Davis coming back for another year and Melvin Priestley.
Priestley as well, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I want to shout out, Missouri was definitely on the list I was looking at, and then Georgia, they do lose basically the entire interior. I do like Monroe Freeling at left tackle, and yes, Ernest Green comes back at right tackle, but he struggled a lot last year. But Georgia's usually somewhere in the top 10 list, but just not this year for me.
I think one more group I just thought of, because they've got Riley Mahlman and most of those guys coming back up at Wisconsin. I mean, Wisconsin, obviously, they're going to have a good offensive line. They always do. That's another one that I think maybe could be on the fringes of this. They got to figure out a lot of other things on their offense, but their offensive line is always pretty good.
Yep. But that wraps up my top 10 offensive lines in college football entering the 2025 season. Next week, we'll be going over to the defensive side of the ball with my top 10 defensive lines in college football entering next year. That'll be on Monday. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any video that we're coming out with right now. We're finishing up position units very soon, and then we're moving on to our team previews for every single Power 4 team going into 2025. But first, my top 10 defensive lines coming out on Monday. We'll see you guys then.